thrown mercilessly into the tiger's den. A simple mistake, a misunderstanding, perhaps, sparks a series of events that will test not only the strength but the very spirit of a young boy, barely a teenager, who never expected his day at the zoo would end this way. He's barely inside the enclosure before he feels the crushing reality sink in, the immense weight of fear that fills the air and seeps into his bones. But the one responsible, the man who threw him in, he doesn't see the boy as a human, much less as a kid who's simply there to enjoy a day out. No, he sees only what he despises, what he's willing to hurt. There's a twisted glint in the man's eye as he stands by, watching with folded arms and a smirk playing on his lips. And what hurts most is that this was no accident. As the boy stands, facing the towering tigers who now look at him with eyes glowing, alert, he hears that cold, piercing voice. Animals recognize their own, don't they? The man sneers. Go on, show me what you're made of. The words cut deeper than the boy could ever explain. He feels each syllable press against his skin like ice, freezing him in place. The insult, dripping with hatred, stings in ways that only those who have experienced such prejudice can fully understand. The man knows what he's doing, he's orchestrating this scene to serve as both punishment and spectacle. The crowd begins to gather, but no one seems to grasp what's happening, not fully. Some gasp in horror, others whisper in confusion. But he's alone, truly alone in that cage, surrounded by beasts, both inside and out. He glances at the bars, searching for a way out, for a miracle. But the man's voice calls out again, louder this time, and any hope he feels is buried under the weight of those scornful words. Come on, kid. Let's see if you belong with them. A single, powerful command from the man and the tigers start to move. They circle the boy, who feels his heart pound so violently he wonders if they can hear it. But what the man doesn't know, what no one watching knows, is that this boy has something inside him that he has only just begun to understand. A calmness, a resilience born from every hardship he's endured, every prejudice he's faced. He closes his eyes, not out of fear but out of something far deeper, something so powerful it steadies him in the face of this unimaginable terror. With a few controlled breaths, he opens his eyes again, only now, his gaze is unwavering, unflinching. The tigers pause. Their heavy breathing fills the silence, and as seconds pass, they seem different. Attentive, almost submissive. One tiger lowers itself onto its belly, its golden eyes still fixed on him but in a way that defies explanation. Another follows, almost mirroring the first. A murmur runs through the crowd, a mix of awe and disbelief. They don't understand what they're seeing. But the man, he's losing his smug expression. There's a crack in his confidence, a flicker of something close to fear as he watches the scene unfold. His gaze darts between the boy and the tigers, as though grappling with the impossibility of it all. In that moment, the tables begin to turn. The boy feels an energy surge within him, something he's never felt before, a certainty that he will not be defeated, not here, not by this man's hatred. He walks slowly to the edge of the enclosure, each step measured, each movement precise, as though he's following some invisible thread of strength that's guiding him out. The tigers, in an act no one could have anticipated, remain still, watching him with an eerie calm. The crowd's murmurs grow, confusion mixing with admiration. Some clap, others watch with hands over their mouths in silent awe. He stops just before reaching the bars, looking up at the man, eyes locked in a fierce, silent exchange. The man's face contorts in anger, confusion, and a shade of fear he can't hide. Looks like you're wrong about one thing, the boy says, his voice steady and resolute. I don't belong with them. But they seem to understand me better than you ever could. There's a collective intake of breath, the crowd inching closer, eagerly awaiting the next move. But now, the boy holds all the power. The roles are reversed. Every eye is on him, and for the first time in his life, he feels a profound strength, a sense of control over a situation meant to break him. As he exits the enclosure, leaving the tigers lying still in his wake, a ripple of disbelief sweeps through the onlookers. But this isn't the end. He steps out of the cage unharmed, untouched by the man's malice, yet he knows there's still a price to be paid. A justice that's been building, waiting to be served. And in the days that follow, as the story of the boy and the tiger spreads, a truth emerges, one that will expose the cruelty and prejudice that led to this moment. The man's fate, still hanging in the balance, hinges on a twist no one sees coming. The world will learn the full story soon enough. But what price will the man pay for his actions, and how far will the boy's courage echo in the days to come? What happens next will leave everyone questioning where true strength lies. Before we dive into today's story, I want to take a moment to address our audience, especially to you, our black viewers. Here on Plow of Twist, we stand firmly against any form of racism or discrimination. Our stories aim to spotlight courage, resilience, and the undeniable strength of those who rise above adversity. You are seen, respected, and valued here. Stick around, because this story is powerful, and we think it will resonate with you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay with us for more stories that uplift and inspire. Enjoy the story. The story unfolds in a bustling corner of New Orleans, in a modest neighborhood where life moves at its own steady rhythm. The morning light filters through the thick canopy of live oaks, casting a serene glow on the rows of tightly knit houses. Families here know each other well, sharing stories across front porches and offering a helping hand when needed. It's a place of resilience, a home to generations who have built lives grounded in community and the quiet dignity of hard work. In this neighborhood lives Jamal, a young boy with an unmistakable spark in his eye, a fire that speaks of ambition, curiosity, and a sense of wonder rarely seen in kids his age. Jamal is 12, but anyone who knows him would say he carries himself with a maturity beyond his years. Jamal's mother, Angela, works 2 jobs to make ends meet. She's a petite woman with a warm smile and the strength of someone who has faced adversity time and again. Angela is deeply protective of Jamal, aware of the challenges he may face simply because of the color of his skin. She's raised him to be proud, to understand his worth, and to know that no one has the right to make him feel small. She's instilled in him a fierce sense of identity and self-respect, always reminding him that he is capable of greatness. Despite the challenges at home, Jamal is a lively, curious kid, full of questions and ideas that often surprise those around him. He has a natural affinity for animals, a bond that seems almost mystical at times. He's spent countless hours reading about animals, understanding their behaviors and quirks, and watching documentaries that transport him to far-off lands. His dream is to work with animals someday, maybe even become a wildlife conservationist. To him, animals are friends, creatures of instinct but also of immense beauty and complexity, each with its own story to tell. One Saturday morning, Angela surprises Jamal with a trip to the zoo. She's saved up for this day, knowing how much it would mean to him. As they step off the bus and approach the entrance, Jamal's face lights up with excitement, his eyes wide with anticipation. The zoo is alive with sounds and smells, a sensory overload that Jamal takes in with delight. Angela watches him with a smile, feeling a mixture of pride and a hint of sadness. She wishes she could give him more of these moments, more time to simply be a kid and explore the world around him. The zoo itself is a sprawling, older establishment, a mix of carefully designed enclosures and outdated facilities. It's a popular spot for families on weekends, filled with the laughter of children and the chattering of visitors. Yet behind the scenes, the zoo is struggling. Funding is tight, and the staff is often overworked. This strain has led to a tense atmosphere among the employees, many of whom are just trying to get through each day without incident. Among the zoo's staff is Rick, a middle-aged man with a chip on his shoulder and a disdain for anyone he sees as different. Rick has worked at the zoo for years, moving from one position to another, never fully satisfied and always quick to blame others for his lack of advancement. His face is etched with lines of bitterness, and his gaze often holds a hardened, unwelcoming glint. For Rick, the zoo isn't a place of wonder, it's a job, a routine, a place where he feels in control, if only by enforcing the rules he holds dear. He's the kind of person who demands respect without offering it in return, someone who wields his authority with an iron grip, particularly over those he perceives as weaker or out of place. As Jamal and Angela make their way through the exhibits, Rick notices them. His gaze lingers a little too long, a flicker of something unpleasant passing over his face. He watches Jamal with a mix of disdain and irritation, a silent judgment that Jamal doesn't yet notice. Angela, however, senses the tension. She's all too familiar with that look, that subtle but unmistakable judgment that she has encountered time and again. They pass by the big cat enclosure, where a group of tigers rests under the shade, their powerful forms radiating a sense of calm yet undeniable strength. Jamal's eyes light up as he sees them, captivated by their grace and presence. He walks closer to the glass, studying the tigers with fascination, admiring their sleek coats and the way they move with a silent, almost regal poise. Angela stands a few steps behind, watching her son, her heart swelling with pride at his enthusiasm. Rick's voice cuts through the air, sharp and condescending. "Hey, kid. What are you staring at? Think you're some kind of animal expert?" Jamal looks up, caught off guard by the tone. He hesitates, unsure how to respond, his face a mixture of surprise and confusion. Angela steps forward, her protective instincts flaring, but Rick's gaze is fixed on Jamal, a thin, mocking smile tugging at his lips. "Bet you don't know the first thing about these animals," Rick sneers. "You probably don't belong here anyway. This isn't some playground for you to run wild in." The words hang in the air, heavy with implication. Angela takes a step closer, her voice firm but controlled. "He's just a kid, here to learn and enjoy himself. We're not bothering anyone." Rick crosses his arms, his gaze unwavering. There's a look of disdain on his face, as if he's trying to assert his authority, to remind them of their place. "Maybe you don't understand the rules here. We don't allow just anyone to wander around like they own the place." Angela's jaw tightens, but before she can respond, Jamal speaks up, his voice quiet but steady. "I was just looking at the tigers. They're beautiful. I want to learn more about them." Rick lets out a low, mocking laugh, his eyes narrowing. "Learn? Kids like you don't belong anywhere near these animals. You wouldn't last a second with them if that glass wasn't there." Jamal feels a knot of anger rise in his chest, a mix of frustration and humiliation that he struggles to suppress. He's not used to being spoken to like this, especially not by someone in a position of authority. Angela puts a hand on his shoulder, gently steering him away, but Rick's words follow them, lingering like a shadow. The rest of the visit is tainted by that encounter, a sour note that Angela and Jamal can't shake. They try to enjoy the other exhibits, but Rick's words hang in the back of their minds, casting a pall over what was meant to be a joyful day. Jamal tries to push it aside, to focus on the animals he loves, but the sting of that encounter stays with him. As they make their way toward the exit, Rick appears again, this time standing near the tiger enclosure. There's a look of satisfaction on his face, as if he's been waiting for this moment. With a smirk, he steps closer to Jamal, lowering his voice to a whisper that only Jamal can hear. "You think you're special, don't you? Think those animals would protect you if it came down to it?" Jamal stares at him, unsure of what to say, a chill running down his spine. Rick's words are laced with a menace that feels almost tangible. "Let's see how tough you really are, kid." Before Jamal can react, Rick makes a sudden movement, and in a moment of calculated cruelty, he shoves Jamal toward the enclosure, closer than anyone should be to the edge. Jamal stumbles, his heart pounding as he realizes just how close he is to the barrier that separates him from the tigers. Angela cries out, her voice filled with panic and fear, but Rick stands back, a twisted smile on his face. "Go on. Show me what you're made of." Jamal feels a rush of fear unlike anything he's ever experienced, but beneath that fear, a spark ignites, a determination, a resilience that he didn't know he had. He steadies himself, his gaze locking onto the tigers, who now watch him with a curious, almost expectant calm. The crowd around them begins to murmur, a mix of confusion and disbelief, but Jamal is focused, his mind racing as he tries to process what's happening. Angela, her voice trembling with anger and desperation, pleads with Rick, her words falling on deaf ears. The crowd watches, a sense of unease growing as they realize something isn't right. Rick's face, however, remains a mask of cold indifference, his satisfaction evident as he watches Jamal. But something shifts in that moment, a change so subtle that only Jamal can feel it. He senses a connection with the animals, a silent understanding that goes beyond words. As he takes a slow, deliberate step forward, the tiger's eyes remain on him, their expressions softening in a way that no one, not even Rick, can explain. The scene has captivated everyone, a blend of awe and fear that leaves them breathless. Yet as Jamal stands there, his heart pounding but his mind clear, he knows this is only the beginning. As Jamal steadies himself, standing only a few feet from the edge of the tiger enclosure, the murmur of the crowd grows louder. Eyes are fixed on him, wide with shock and fear, whispers filling the air as they try to comprehend the scene unfolding before them. Angela, desperate and panicked, reaches out, but she's held back by a small group of onlookers, worried about making the situation worse. Her heart is pounding, a fierce anger boiling under her skin, yet helplessness fills her gaze as she looks at her son. Rick, standing a few steps behind with arms crossed and a satisfied smirk, glances around, reveling in the attention. For him, this moment is a twisted thrill, a way to assert power, to remind Jamal of what he sees as his place. "Well, look at you," Rick's voice cuts through the tension, dripping with sarcasm. "Not so brave now, are you?" Jamal turns to face him, his young face a mix of fear, anger, and a resilience he doesn't yet fully understand. He swallows, his voice steady but low. "I wasn't trying to prove anything," he says, his gaze unwavering. "I just wanted to learn. You didn't have to do this." Rick lets out a dismissive chuckle, a sneer twisting his lips. "Learn? Kid, you don't belong here. People like you don't get to stroll around and act like this place is yours." A gasp ripples through the crowd, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Some look away, uncomfortable, while others whisper in shock, but Rick is unfazed, too caught up in his own twisted satisfaction to notice. Jamal's fists clench at his sides, but he keeps his expression calm, not wanting to give Rick the reaction he's seeking. Angela's voice trembles as she steps forward, finally breaking free from the hold of those trying to restrain her. "Enough," she shouts, her voice steady, though tinged with the desperation of a mother's fear. "You've gone too far. Let him out of here, now." Rick glances at her, an unbothered expression on his face, his tone cold. "Maybe he'll learn a thing or two today. You know, about respecting his place. Maybe you will, too." The silence that follows is thick with tension, an uneasy anticipation hanging in the air. Jamal feels every gaze, the weight of each whispered word, yet his eyes remain fixed on the tigers, who watch him in a stillness that's both unnerving and oddly comforting. He senses something deeper in their eyes, a recognition, a connection he can't quite explain. He takes a slow breath, feeling a calmness settle over him despite the danger. A zookeeper arrives, alerted by the commotion, and approaches Rick with a mixture of confusion and authority. "Rick, what's going on here?" she demands, looking between Jamal, Angela, and the tigers with growing concern. "This is completely inappropriate. He's just a kid." Rick waves her off with a dismissive hand, his expression hardening as he turns back to Jamal. "Stay out of this, Lisa. I'm handling it. The kid was getting too close, and I was just showing him what happens when rules are broken." Lisa's face fills with disbelief as she takes in the scene, her eyes narrowing at Rick. She steps forward, her tone firm. "This is out of line, even for you, Rick. You don't teach lessons by putting people's lives at risk. Step back, now." The crowd watches in tense silence, drawn to the confrontation yet helpless to intervene. Rick hesitates, his jaw tightening as he feels his grip on the situation slipping. He glances back at Jamal, his expression flickering between defiance and unease. "Fine," he mutters, stepping back reluctantly. But the venom in his gaze remains, a lingering threat hanging in the air. Angela rushes to Jamal's side, her arms wrapping around him tightly. Jamal feels the relief in her grip, but he stands still, his eyes locked on Rick. There's a fire in his gaze now, a determination that wasn't there before. He's no longer simply a scared kid, he's someone who's felt the sting of humiliation and the heat of anger, and something within him has shifted. Rick's gaze lingers on them for a moment before he turns to leave, his expression a mask of controlled anger. But Jamal's voice stops him in his tracks. "You're wrong about me, you know." Rick freezes, turning slowly to face Jamal, his expression one of hardened disbelief. "What did you say, kid?" Jamal takes a step forward, his voice calm but strong, each word carrying the weight of his defiance. "I don't belong with those tigers. But they understand me. Maybe more than you ever could." The words hang in the air, a silence descending over the crowd as they take in the quiet strength in Jamal's voice. Rick's face twists in anger, but there's something else there now, something close to fear, a realization that he's lost control. Jamal's words have cut deeper than he anticipated, piercing through the facade Rick has built around himself. Lisa, sensing the tension, steps in, her voice steady but firm. "That's enough, Rick. You've crossed a line, and there will be consequences for this." Rick glares at her, his face contorting in frustration, but he says nothing. He knows he's been exposed, that his actions have left a mark that can't easily be erased. As he walks away, the crowd begins to disperse, murmuring amongst themselves, some casting sympathetic glances toward Jamal and Angela. Angela holds Jamal close, her voice a mixture of relief and quiet pride. "You were brave today, Jamal. Don't ever forget that." Jamal nods, but his mind is already turning, replaying the scene, the words, the way Rick looked at him with that mix of hatred and disdain. He feels a spark of resolve igniting within him, a determination to stand up, not just for himself but for anyone who has ever been made to feel small. Later, as they leave the zoo, Jamal can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. He senses the tension in the air, the way Rick's gaze lingered, the unspoken threat that seemed to linger in his final glare. But he also feels something else, a sense of strength, of resilience that wasn't there before. In the following days, Jamal can't stop thinking about the tigers, about the way they seemed to respond to him in that moment, their calmness in the face of his fear. He spends hours researching, reading about animal behavior, trying to understand the connection he felt. It becomes an obsession, a need to grasp the unexplainable, as though finding answers will give him a sense of closure, of power over what happened. But Rick hasn't forgotten either. Humiliated and furious, he becomes consumed with a desire to regain control, to reassert his authority. He's haunted by the memory of Jamal's defiance, the way the crowd looked at him with disdain. He knows he went too far, that his actions have consequences, yet he can't let it go. In his mind, Jamal represents everything he despises, a challenge to his power, a reminder of his own insecurities, of the respect he's never truly earned. Days pass, and Rick grows more bitter, his anger simmering beneath the surface. He begins to plot, seeking ways to reassert his dominance, to ensure that Jamal and Angela understand their place. His mind twists with schemes, each one darker than the last, fueled by his wounded pride and a desire for revenge. Meanwhile, Jamal feels a sense of change within himself, a quiet but unyielding resolve. He knows he will return to the zoo one day, not out of fear but to confront the place where he faced humiliation and rose above it. He wants to show himself, his mother, and perhaps even Rick that he is stronger than the hate and prejudice thrown his way. That he won't be defined by someone else's small-mindedness. He starts volunteering at a local animal shelter, immersing himself in the world of animals, learning more about their behavior, their needs, their unspoken language. The shelter staff notice his natural talent, the way he seems to connect with the animals in a way that's almost instinctual. Word of his quiet determination spreads, and soon, others begin to take notice, inspired by his resilience. Angela watches him with pride, her heart swelling as she sees her son grow stronger, more confident. She knows that what happened at the zoo has left its mark, but she also sees the strength it has given him, the way it has shaped him into someone who refuses to be broken. And then, just as things seem to settle, a twist of fate brings them back to the zoo. Jamal's class is scheduled for a field trip, and despite his initial reluctance, he agrees to go. This time, however, he's different. He's prepared, ready to face whatever may come, determined to reclaim his dignity, to prove, to himself, to Rick, and to anyone watching, that he is more than the label others try to place on him. As they enter the zoo, Jamal feels a calmness wash over him, a strength rooted in everything he's learned, everything he's endured. He knows Rick will be there, waiting, watching, but this time, he's ready. In the days leading up to the trip, a visitor had captured the incident on video and posted it online. The footage spread quickly, sparking outrage and disbelief, bringing attention to the incident in ways no one anticipated. The public reaction has been swift, with calls for justice, demands for accountability, and a growing outcry against the zoo's handling of the situation. The video circulates, reaching news outlets, activists, and countless strangers who see Jamal not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience. As Jamal approaches the tiger enclosure once more, he feels the weight of those watching, the silent support of those who've seen his story and felt his strength. And he knows, deep down, that this time, the outcome will be different. What happens next will change everything. The air is thick with tension as Jamal steps onto the grounds of the zoo, his classmates trailing behind him, unaware of the quiet storm brewing inside him. He's been here before, stood in the same spot, but this time it feels different. The familiar sounds of animals and the chatter of other visitors buzz around him, but his focus remains sharp, his mind steady, fortified by everything he's endured since that fateful day. Beside him, Angela walks with a steady grace, though her eyes flicker with an edge of caution. She's proud of Jamal's resilience but aware of the dangers of confronting old wounds. A teacher calls for the students' attention, guiding them toward the exhibits, and Angela leans down, whispering gently. "Remember, you're stronger than he'll ever understand," she murmurs. Jamal nods, a quiet determination in his eyes. They move through the zoo, the students eagerly peeking at the enclosures, the vibrant creatures who draw them in with their beauty and grace. Jamal feels the familiar pull as well, but this time, his heart beats with an anticipation he can't ignore. And then, they reach the tiger enclosure. The class gathers near the fence, eyes wide with awe, pointing at the powerful animals lounging within. Jamal feels a chill settle over him. The tigers lie there, majestic and calm, as if they hold secrets he alone could understand. He steps closer, hands gripping the fence tightly. Just as his thoughts drift, he hears a familiar voice, cold and unyielding. "Back again, kid." Jamal turns, finding himself face to face with Rick. His face holds that same sneer, but there's something new in his eyes, a flicker of bitterness, maybe even fear, fueled by the crowd's eyes on him and the now infamous video of his previous actions that had swept through every corner of the internet. The outcry had been swift and loud, demanding consequences, calling him out for what he had done. Jamal's heart pounds, but he stands his ground, meeting Rick's gaze with an unflinching stare. "I am back," Jamal says, his voice steady, calm. "And this time, I'm not afraid of you." Rick smirks, glancing at Angela, then back at Jamal. "Oh, you think you're brave, huh? Think you can stand there and act like you've won something? You don't know the first thing about the real world, kid." Angela steps forward, her tone firm but restrained, a fierce protectiveness in her gaze. "We're not here to argue with you, Rick. Jamal's here to show that he's not defined by people like you." Rick's face twists, the sneer fading to something darker. "People like me? And what kind of person do you think I am?" he asks, voice low and biting. Jamal's gaze doesn't waver. You're the kind of person who needs to feel powerful by putting others down. But you can't take my strength from me. Not today. Rick laughs, but there's no humor in it, only a sharp edge that betrays his anger. He steps closer, lowering his voice so only Jamal and Angela can hear. I don't care what people are saying about me. This is my territory, and I'll run things the way I see fit. Angela steps protectively between them, her voice cutting through the tension. You don't scare us, Rick. We're here because Jamal is brave enough to stand in front of you and not back down. And we're not leaving until you understand that. A ripple of murmurs flows through the crowd that's begun to gather, sensing the unease, the confrontation unfolding before them. Rick glances at the onlookers, a scowl on his face as he realizes that this moment is slipping from his control, that once again, he's the center of an unwanted attention he can't avoid. Then, Lisa, the zookeeper from before, appears, stepping into the tense circle forming around Rick and Jamal. Rick, she says, her voice firm. You need to leave. Now. This isn't your shift, and I think you've caused enough trouble. Rick's expression hardens, his gaze darting between Jamal, Angela, and the onlookers. For a moment, he looks ready to argue, but something in Lisa's tone gives him pause. He scoffs, turning to leave, but not before shooting Jamal one last glare. Enjoy your little victory, kid. But don't think this changes anything. As he walks away, the crowd around them begins to disperse, but a quiet tension lingers, the echoes of what just happened hanging in the air. Jamal feels a rush of relief, mixed with something else, an understanding that Rick's words, while empty, are part of a pattern he's determined to break. Lisa steps closer to Jamal, her expression softening. I'm sorry you had to go through that again, Jamal. Rick, he's been warned, but I know words aren't enough. Jamal nods, gratitude in his eyes. Thank you, Lisa. I don't want him to do this to anyone else. Lisa sighs, glancing back toward where Rick disappeared. We're doing everything we can to hold him accountable. But people like him don't change easily. What you did today, though, it matters. More than you know. Angela places a hand on Jamal's shoulder, and they exchange a look, a shared understanding of the weight they carry, but also of the strength they've found together. As the day winds down and the students prepare to leave, Jamal finds himself drawn back to the tiger enclosure, a quiet peace settling over him as he watches the animals. He feels a strange sense of closure, as though he's reclaimed something that was almost taken from him. But as he turns to leave, a familiar rumble echoes from the back of the enclosure. The largest tiger, its eyes sharp and wise, rises to its feet, padding slowly toward him, its gaze fixed on Jamal with an intensity that feels almost human. Jamal's breath catches, a strange calm filling him as he meets the tiger's eyes. There's no fear, only a deep, unspoken understanding, a connection that transcends words, something primal and ancient. The tiger sits, watching him with a gaze that feels like a silent acknowledgement, a moment shared between boy and beast that only they understand. Angela, noticing Jamal's stillness, turns back, her eyes widening as she sees the exchange. She steps closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Jamal, he's looking right at you. Jamal nods, his voice soft but steady. I know. It's like he sees me. They stand together, mother and son, in silent reverence for the power of the moment. Jamal feels something inside him shift, a newfound sense of peace, of strength that doesn't rely on defiance but on quiet resilience. The tiger's gaze lingers a moment longer before it rises, turning back into the shadows of the enclosure. Jamal watches it disappear, a feeling of gratitude filling his heart as he realizes that, despite everything, he is stronger, braver, and more resilient than he ever knew. As they walk toward the exit, Angela glances down at her son, a gentle smile breaking through her weariness. You know, Jamal, I think you showed everyone today that you're not just brave, you're powerful. Jamal looks up, a quiet confidence in his eyes. Maybe. But I think I've always been that way. I just had to see it for myself. As they leave, Jamal knows that this experience has changed him. He's faced down fear, stared hatred in the eyes, and come out stronger on the other side. He doesn't know what the future holds, but for the first time, he's not afraid of it. And as they step outside the gates, he knows that he is, truly, unstoppable. As Jamal and Angela make their way toward the zoo exit, a strange energy lingers between them. They feel the weight of everything that has transpired: Jamal's encounter with Rick, the tense moments with the tigers, the newfound respect from his classmates and onlookers. Yet, there's also a sense of unfinished business, an awareness that this experience has marked them both in ways they are only beginning to understand. As they near the gates, a voice cuts through the air, stopping them in their tracks. "Not so fast, kid." Jamal and Angela turn, finding themselves face to face with Rick once more. He stands just outside the zoo entrance, his expression hard, jaw clenched. His eyes are sharper than before, carrying a mix of frustration, anger, and something darker, a resolve to reclaim the control he feels slipping through his fingers. Angela immediately steps between him and Jamal, her face set, a fierce protectiveness in her eyes. "Rick, you've done enough," she says firmly. "This needs to end here." Rick lets out a low, humorless laugh, shaking his head as he steps closer, his voice barely above a whisper, each word laced with bitterness. "End? This isn't over until I say it's over. You think you can just walk away, act like you've won? You've humiliated me in front of everyone. And you're going to pay for that." Jamal, his face a mixture of anger and defiance, takes a step forward, refusing to let fear hold him back. "I didn't do anything to you," he says, his voice steady. "You're the one who tried to make me feel small. But it didn't work. And it never will." Rick's eyes narrow, his face twisting with resentment as he searches for words, for a way to regain the power he's lost. For him, this moment isn't just about Jamal, it's about everything he's fought to hold on to, every insecurity he's tried to bury beneath a facade of authority and superiority. "You think you're tough, don't you?" he spits, voice rising. "Think you're brave because you got through one little scare? Life doesn't care about bravery, kid. It chews people like you up and spits them out." Angela's voice cuts through the tension, sharp and unwavering. "Jamal has more strength in him than you'll ever understand. And no amount of hate or intimidation is going to change that." The onlookers nearby, zoo employees, visitors, and classmates alike, begin to gather, drawn by the charged atmosphere. They watch with a mix of curiosity, concern, and silent support, their eyes shifting between Jamal, Angela, and Rick. Lisa, the zookeeper, emerges from the crowd, stepping forward with a sense of authority that Rick can't ignore. Her gaze is firm, her tone unwavering. "Rick, this is enough. You've crossed the line, and it's time for you to walk away." Rick glares at her, a look of betrayal flashing across his face. "You're taking their side. You know me, Lisa. We've worked together for years. I thought you understood what it takes to keep this place in order." Lisa's expression remains resolute as she speaks, her voice steady. "I know what it means to create a safe environment for everyone here. And I know when someone's gone too far. This isn't about order, Rick, it's about respect. Something you lost a long time ago." The crowd murmurs, a collective sense of agreement rising among them. Rick's face darkens as he realizes he's lost his audience, that the authority he's clung to for so long is slipping through his fingers. He looks back at Jamal, a flicker of desperation in his eyes, as if searching for something to salvage his pride. You think this changes anything?" he says, his voice strained. "You think anyone here actually cares about you? They'll move on, forget all about this. People like you don't matter." Jamal stands tall, meeting Rick's gaze with a calm, unwavering strength that surprises even himself. "Maybe you're right," he says quietly. Maybe some people won't remember this. But I will. And that's enough. For a moment, silence falls over the crowd, each person processing the weight of Jamal's words. Rick stands there, his confidence shattered, his facade crumbling under the intensity of the moment. It's a realization that he's not only lost the respect of those around him, but he's also revealed his own insecurities, his own failings in a way that can't be undone. Suddenly, a voice from the crowd speaks up, a woman's voice, steady and clear. "You're a brave young man, Jamal." Others nod, murmuring their agreement, and soon, a ripple of supportive words spreads through the gathering. Some clap, others offer words of encouragement, their eyes filled with admiration for the young boy who stood his ground in the face of cruelty. Rick's face flushes, his fists clenching at his sides as he takes in the crowd's reaction, the outpouring of support for Jamal, the utter disregard for his own authority. It's a loss more profound than he could have imagined, a defeat that strips away the power he's held so tightly. As the crowd disperses, Lisa steps closer to Jamal and Angela, her expression softened, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "You're quite a remarkable young man, Jamal," she says gently. "Not many people would have had the strength to face what you did." Jamal offers a small, humble smile, glancing up at his mother, who nods, pride filling her gaze. "I just wanted to show him that he couldn't take anything from me," Jamal says quietly, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. "That no one can make me feel small." Angela places a hand on his shoulder, her voice filled with warmth. "And you did, Jamal. You showed everyone here what real strength looks like." As they turn to leave, Jamal takes one last look back at the zoo, the place where he faced his fears, where he stood against a force that tried to diminish him and emerged stronger, prouder than ever. He knows that he'll carry this moment with him, that it's become a part of him in a way he'll never forget. Just before they reach the gate, Jamal feels a gentle tug on his sleeve. He turns to see a young boy, perhaps no older than 8, looking up at him with wide, admiring eyes. "Were you really in the tiger cage?" the boy asks, awe clear in his voice. Jamal smiles, crouching down to meet the boy's gaze. "Yeah, I was. And you know what? I learned something really important that day." The boy leans in, hanging on to Jamal's every word. "What did you learn?" Jamal's gaze softens as he replies, his voice filled with quiet strength. "I learned that no one can tell you who you are. Only you can decide that." The boy nods, as if taking this wisdom to heart, before running back to his own family, leaving Jamal with a sense of purpose he hadn't expected. Angela watches the exchange with a smile, knowing that her son has not only grown but has become an inspiration to those around him. As they step through the gates, leaving the zoo behind, Jamal feels a deep, unshakable peace settle over him. He's no longer defined by that moment of fear, nor by the hatred that tried to break him. He is, and always will be, far stronger than those who sought to bring him down. And as they walk into the light of a new day, he knows that whatever challenges come his way, he will face them with the same courage, the same quiet strength, that carried him through this one. As Jamal and Angela leave the zoo, they feel a powerful shift, a momentous change that is impossible to ignore. What began as an ordinary day turned into an experience that has tested every ounce of courage and strength they possess. Yet, despite the pride swelling in Jamal's chest, there is a sense of unfinished business lingering in the air. Jamal's confrontation with Rick, the support from the crowd, and the look of recognition in the tiger's eyes, all these elements have woven together a story he never anticipated, a story that now has a life of its own. In the days that follow, news of the confrontation spreads beyond their neighborhood. People are drawn to the story of a young boy standing up to injustice, facing down an adult who tried to break him. The video, already circulating widely, gains even more traction, with thousands of viewers commenting, sharing, and reacting to Jamal's resilience. Messages pour in, some from strangers who share their own stories of facing discrimination, others from parents expressing their admiration for Jamal's bravery. The story of the boy who faced the tigers becomes a symbol of strength, resonating with people far and wide. For Jamal, the attention is overwhelming. He never set out to be the center of a movement, never imagined that his personal struggle would become something so public. He reads through the messages with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief, wondering how a single moment could ripple outwards to touch so many lives. At the same time, he's aware of the subtle but powerful shift happening around him. His classmates, who once teased or ignored him, now look at him with a newfound respect. Some even ask to hear the story directly from him, their voices filled with awe and curiosity. For Jamal, the experience is bittersweet. He's grateful for the support, yet part of him wishes he hadn't needed to face such a test to earn it. Meanwhile, the zoo is feeling the weight of public scrutiny. Rick's actions, once hidden in the shadow of authority, are now exposed, laid bare for all to see. Lisa, the zookeeper who intervened during the confrontation, has been approached by reporters, asked to share her perspective on the incident. She speaks openly about the need for accountability, about the importance of treating every visitor, regardless of background, with respect and dignity. Her words resonate, echoing the sentiments of those who have witnessed Jamal's strength and Rick's fall from grace. The zoo's board of directors, faced with mounting public pressure, holds a meeting to discuss Rick's future. There is a heated debate. Some argue that his long years of service should earn him a second chance, while others insist that his actions were inexcusable, that his behavior has caused irreparable harm not only to Jamal but to the zoo's reputation. The decision is made to terminate Rick's employment, a move that sends shockwaves through the staff. Rick, who had always held himself above reproach, who believed himself untouchable, is suddenly cast out, stripped of the authority he once wielded so ruthlessly. As the news reaches Rick, he feels a bitter mixture of anger, shame, and disbelief. He spent years building his position, maintaining a sense of control over his small corner of the world. Now, in a matter of days, everything he held dear, his job, his authority, his pride, has crumbled. He's haunted by the memory of Jamal's steady gaze, the quiet defiance in the boy's eyes that exposed the emptiness of his own power. Rick realizes, perhaps for the first time, that his hatred has not only hurt others, it has hollowed him out, leaving him with nothing but the bitter ashes of his own resentment. In his isolation, Rick finds himself grappling with a moral dilemma. He could leave the city, attempt to start fresh in a place where no one knows his name. But part of him is drawn back to the moment of his downfall, to the boy who stood in front of him and refused to be broken. There's a stirring within him, an uncomfortable awareness that his hatred has cost him everything he once valued. For the first time, Rick considers the possibility of change, of seeking a path not driven by bitterness but by a desire to rebuild, to find redemption in a world that has turned its back on him. Meanwhile, Jamal feels the weight of responsibility that comes with his newfound role as a symbol of resilience. He's approached by local activists, teachers, and even community leaders, all of whom see him as a beacon of hope, a young voice capable of inspiring others to stand against injustice. Jamal listens to their words, humbled and a bit overwhelmed. He's just a kid, he reminds himself, someone who wants to live in a world where he can pursue his dreams without fear of being diminished or dismissed. Yet he feels a stirring inside, a recognition that his story, his courage, has sparked something larger than himself. One evening, as he sits in his room, surrounded by the letters and messages he's received, Jamal turns to his mother. "Mom," he says, his voice quiet, contemplative. "Do you think I can really make a difference? I'm just one person." Angela places a hand on his shoulder, her voice warm and filled with conviction. "Jamal, sometimes it only takes one person to change the way others see the world. You've shown people that they don't have to accept hate, that they can stand up and make their voices heard. That's a gift, son. And it's yours to use however you choose." Jamal nods, her words settling in his heart. He feels a sense of clarity, a determination to use his voice, his experience, to continue the fight against the kind of injustice he faced. But he's also aware of the complexities, the weight of expectations now resting on his shoulders. He doesn't want to be defined solely by this experience, to be seen only as the boy who stood up to cruelty. He dreams of a future where he can pursue his passions, where his identity isn't confined to a single moment of defiance. In the days that follow, Jamal takes steps to navigate this new reality. He begins speaking at local events, sharing his story not as a tale of heroism but as a reminder of resilience, of the power each person holds to face down prejudice and emerge stronger. His words resonate with those who listen, sparking conversations about dignity, respect, and the quiet courage that lives within each of us. Jamal becomes more than a symbol, he becomes a voice, a reminder that strength doesn't come from overpowering others but from lifting oneself up in the face of adversity. Yet, even as Jamal's life moves forward, he can't shake the lingering question of Rick. He wonders if the man who sought to break him has found any understanding in his downfall, if there's any possibility of change for someone so entrenched in anger and resentment. Jamal feels the pull of empathy, a part of him that longs to believe in the possibility of redemption, even for those who have caused harm. But he's also aware that forgiveness is complex, that the scars left by hatred can't simply be erased with an apology. One afternoon, as he prepares to leave for another speaking engagement, Jamal receives an unexpected message. It's from Rick, written with an unfamiliar humility that catches him off guard. In the message, Rick acknowledges the harm he's caused, the damage he inflicted not only on Jamal but on himself. He speaks of the emptiness he feels, the realization that his anger and bitterness have led him down a path of self-destruction. He doesn't ask for forgiveness, knowing that such a request is too much to ask, but he expresses a desire to understand, to find a way to rebuild his life without the weight of hatred dragging him down. Jamal reads the message, his heart torn between empathy and the pain of the memory. He feels the echoes of that day, the humiliation and fear, but he also senses the vulnerability in Rick's words, the fragile hope for something different. It's a moment that challenges him, a moral dilemma that forces him to confront the complexities of forgiveness, the possibility of change, even for those who have hurt him deeply. Angela, noticing Jamal's thoughtful expression, sits beside him, her voice gentle. "You don't have to respond, Jamal," she says softly. "You've already shown strength beyond your years. Whatever you choose, it's enough." Jamal nods, the weight of her words settling over him. He realizes that forgiveness doesn't have to mean erasing the past, that compassion can exist alongside boundaries. After a long pause, he decides to write a response, not one of forgiveness but of understanding. He writes to Rick, acknowledging the pain caused, the scars left behind, but he also expresses his hope that Rick can find a path forward, that he can build a life not defined by bitterness but by a willingness to grow. In sending the message, Jamal feels a sense of release, a quiet peace that tells him he has chosen the right path, one that honors both his experience and his desire to move forward without hatred weighing him down. It's a decision that reflects his strength, a choice that embodies the resilience he's come to understand so deeply. As he steps onto the stage that evening, ready to share his story once more, Jamal feels a clarity he hadn't expected. He's no longer the boy who faced the tigers out of fear, he's become a young man who understands the power of resilience, the strength that comes from facing down darkness and choosing light. And in that moment, he knows that whatever lies ahead, he will face it with the same courage, the same compassion, that has carried him through every trial. In the months that follow, life takes on a new rhythm for Jamal and Angela. Their lives are marked by quiet moments of growth and reflection, where each step forward feels like a testament to the strength they have forged together. The experience at the zoo has become a part of them, shaping not only their identities but also their understanding of resilience, forgiveness, and the weight of one's actions. Jamal's story continues to inspire people far beyond his community. He finds himself receiving invitations to speak at schools, community centers, and events dedicated to justice and equality. At first, the attention feels overwhelming, but gradually, he grows into this role, realizing that sharing his story can be a source of strength not only for him but for those who listen. He speaks not to place himself on a pedestal, but to show others that strength is not about fearlessness, it's about facing your fears and rising above them. As he becomes more comfortable on stage, Jamal speaks with a quiet confidence, a humility that resonates deeply with his audience. People are drawn to his authenticity, the honesty with which he recounts his journey. He doesn't hide his vulnerabilities, nor does he pretend that overcoming fear is easy. Instead, he embraces his story in all its complexity, using it as a bridge to connect with others who may feel unseen, unworthy, or diminished. Meanwhile, Rick's life has taken a much different path. After losing his job and facing public condemnation, he finds himself grappling with an emptiness he had spent years ignoring. His life, once marked by routine and a false sense of control, has unraveled, leaving him to confront the bitterness that had defined him for so long. He moves to a quieter town, taking up a simple job far removed from the authority he once wielded. It's a humbling existence, one that forces him to reckon with the choices he's made and the impact they've had not only on others but on himself. In the quiet of his new life, Rick begins to understand the weight of the anger he carried, the way it hardened him and alienated him from those around him. He starts volunteering at a local animal shelter, a place where he's reminded of Jamal's connection with the tigers, of the compassion he himself had once dismissed as weakness. The work is slow and unglamorous, but he finds an unexpected peace in caring for animals, in learning to understand and respect creatures who rely on trust rather than dominance. Over time, Rick experiences a quiet, subtle change, a shift from bitterness to a tentative openness, a willingness to rebuild himself from the ground up. Jamal's impact on Rick is something neither of them could have anticipated, yet it's there, a quiet undercurrent of transformation that speaks to the power of resilience and the human capacity for change. Though Jamal may never know the full extent of Rick's journey, he senses a closure within himself, a peace that comes from knowing he did not let hatred define him. Angela, too, finds herself transformed by the experience. Watching Jamal grow into his strength has been both humbling and inspiring for her. She has always been proud of her son, but now, she sees him with new eyes, as a young man who has not only weathered hardship but used it to find his own voice. The experience strengthens their bond, deepening the understanding they share and the respect they hold for each other. One day, after a speaking event where Jamal has once again moved an audience to tears, Angela takes his hand, her eyes shining with pride. "Jamal, you've become more than I ever dreamed," she says softly. "You're creating change just by being who you are." Jamal smiles, his heart filled with gratitude. "I learned from the best," he replies, his voice filled with affection. "You showed me how to be strong, even when it wasn't easy." Together, they walk toward the future with a quiet confidence, a shared understanding of the journey that has brought them here. For Jamal, the world feels both vast and full of possibility, a place where he is no longer defined by fear or hatred but by the choices he makes and the strength he carries within. The experience leaves Jamal with a powerful sense of self, a belief that his worth is not determined by others' perceptions but by the values he holds dear: respect, compassion, and the courage to stand up for himself and others. He knows there will be challenges ahead, that life will continue to test him, but he faces it all with an unshakable belief in his own resilience. As they leave the event, a young girl approaches Jamal, looking up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. "Can I be strong like you one day?" she asks shyly, clutching a small notebook to her chest. Jamal crouches down to her level, meeting her gaze with a gentle smile. "You already are," he says. "Strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about standing up, even when things are hard. You've got that strength inside you already." The girl nods, her face lighting up as she clutches her notebook tightly. As she walks away, Jamal feels a profound sense of purpose, a knowledge that his story is not just his own but a part of something larger, a movement toward kindness, dignity, and the courage to face down even the darkest of challenges. Reflecting on Jamal's journey, we are reminded of the profound impact that one act of resilience can have. In facing down prejudice and standing up to cruelty, Jamal became a symbol of courage, showing us that true strength doesn't come from dominance or control but from the quiet power of self-respect and empathy. His story resonates because it speaks to the core of what it means to be human, to face challenges with dignity, to rise above hatred, and to believe in the possibility of change, even for those who seem beyond redemption. As we think about Jamal's story, let's ask ourselves, what does resilience mean to us? How can we, in our own lives, stand up for what's right, not through anger or revenge but through compassion and strength? Jamal's journey teaches us that we all have the power to create change, to face down our fears, and to inspire those around us by embracing who we are, flaws and all. If you felt moved by this story, if Jamal's courage and his mother's strength resonated with you, please consider subscribing to Tales of Twist. Here, we share stories of resilience, redemption, and the human spirit's ability to rise above even the darkest moments. Your support helps us continue to bring you tales that inspire and challenge us to think deeper. Hit the subscribe button, and join us on this journey for more stories that remind us of the strength we all carry within.